I'm going to turn it over to Katie Kennedy now. Katie is the retail specialist for the states of Oregon, Alaska, and Hawaii. And I'm going to turn it over to her and she'll moderate for the rest of today's sessions. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Katherine.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Katherine, so much for that video. I got a little chill, like watching it thinking, you know, we don't get to see each other and we're doing this by Zoom and that, you know, usually we'd be together somewhere. And so that was really kind of nice to actually see faces. So thank you so much for putting that together. We are ready now to move on with the rest of our afternoon session. Katherine Del Mundo is going to be facilitating the next panel discussion. And Katherine, as Chris said this morning, came to us. Many of you know her from Guam. She's working out of our Denver district office now for FDA as a regional special retail food specialist and working primarily with the state of Arizona. And Katherine's going to be facilitating a panel discussion with several of our local health departments to talk about their experiences working on Standard 3 risk-based inspections. So Katherine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Katie. Hello, everyone. So I hope you're enjoying our breakout session so far. We have an amazing set of panelists lined up today that will be sharing their experiences with Standard 3. Now, if you'd like to know more information about each of their agency, an overview of their agency information can be found in the download section of the Pacific Retail Breakout landing page on Pathable. Like with the previous panel, we will spend about 10 minutes for each panelist, followed by a Q&A in the end if we have time. So please add your questions on the chat and don't forget to identify the speaker for your question. Now, to kickstart our Take the Risk panel session, I would like to introduce Timothy Hurst from Maricopa County Environmental Health Services in Arizona. So Tim is the Environmental Health Supervisor for the department and serves as one of the department's main liaison for participating in the voluntary National Retail Food Regulatory Program standards. So Tim, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you now.
Good afternoon or morning, everyone. This is Tim Hurst with Maricopa County. We're the jurisdiction that handles the greater Phoenix, Arizona area. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about how we've met Standard 3 and just kind of a little bit of history on our department as far as the standards are concerned. Next slide. This is our vision and mission statement. Just give a little background, brief background about our department. We're actually an environmental health leader. We develop and foster innovative environmental health protection programs for the safety of our residents and their environment. We also have several different divisions within our department, particularly like vector control, solid waste, and different. And then we have our swimming pool program, as well as our refuse transfer stations. Next slide. As a department, we have actually been enrolled in the program standards since 2002. We have met standards 1, 7, and 9 after our first assessment back in 2002. And we met many of the provisions of the other standards as well at that time. We currently meet standards 1, 3, 4, 7, and 9 following our last self-assessment in 2015. And we are currently in the process of conducting our department's fourth self-assessment. Next slide. In order for the history for meeting Standard 3, it all started in with the adoption of the FDA Model Food Code by reference from 1999 in 2001. This was a major change for us. The previous code that we had was from 1976. It was a very antiquated code. This changed our inspection form to model the FDA's form requiring the selection of in, out, not observed, and not applicable for a forced evaluation of each risk factor. It developed a class-based inspection frequency, which I'll talk about here in a few slides, and then also for developed some procedures for code variance requests and the verification and validation passive plans. Next slide. This is just a screenshot of what our form looks like. If you look at this, it really models the FDA's food code model form that they have. again, forcing the evaluation of the 27 risk factors for foodborne illness. Next slide. As far as our class-based inspection frequency, we have 5 different class levels for our food establishments. And it's all based on the risk and the type of food preparation that they're doing. So class 1 would be our lowest type classification. These will be our prepackaged retail foods, non-food establishments. We have some places that are such as micro markets, which really don't have any staff present. It's basically vending machines. So those would be falling underneath class 1s. Class 2s would be things like our bakeries, food prep or pre-prepared food, food banks. Many of our convenience stores are class 2, so they're not handling any raw product. Those are a biannual inspection. And our class 3s, limited menu, cook serve. These will be your average fast food type establishments. So there's really no pre-prep of food service. So it's food that is directly sent to the customer. And again, these are a biannual inspection as well. And then we have our class 4. These will be the majority of our full service type restaurants. Extensive menu involved advanced prep. Could be having variances and other specialized processes involved. And these are inspected every 4 months. And then finally, our highest class level will be our high risk establishments, such as our highly susceptible type populations, our hospitals, our nursing homes, our jails, and catering operations. And these are inspected quarterly. Next slide. Our variance request for food establishments was established when we adopted the code back in 2001. And some of the variances that are required, and we have a lot of new processes that are coming up now too. Smoking of food as a method of food preservation, curing food, using food additives as a method of food preservation to render food non-TCS. This would be like adding vinegar to sushi rice. Reduced oxygen packaging, operation of live molluscan shellfish tanks, custom animal processing, sprouting seeds or beans, or any other activity determined by the department that includes live slaughter of animals, fish, and birds, and potentially other operations such as cold brew coffee. Next slide. One of the things that we developed when we first did our first self-assessment back in 2002, we did not meet the provision of having requiring an active managerial control step or a intervention plan for priority risk factors that especially that have been repeated on consecutive inspections. So what's required now is we have an active managerial control intervention plan where whenever a priority violation of the same code reference is noted on 2 consecutive inspections. At that time, the AHS offers the operator the opportunity for a separate active managerial control intervention visit. And this is an optional thing for the operator to do to help mitigate preventing that violation from reoccurring in the future. During this AMC visit, the inspector will conduct a root cause analysis of the out of compliance risk factors. So for instance, if it's cold holding, we'll develop a policy. They'll develop a training plan on the policy for staff, and then a verification procedure on the policy. And the important thing is to making sure that the operator has a lot of buy-in into this process in order for the intervention to work. And then finally, we have an AMC class intervention, which I'll talk about a little bit more here in a future slide, that requires whenever a priority violation of the same code reference is noted on 3 consecutive inspections. Next slide. One of the things that we've developed over the years is develop an active managerial control toolbox. In 2015, we were awarded a grant, a 5-year cooperative agreement grant with the FDA in order to develop this. Part of the reason for this is we found that many operators were having a lot of challenges with developing these kind of procedures. And we all know this working in the regulatory field. A lot of times when you write things on paper, it's not always translating well to industry staff who work on a very visual and oral culture. And that's really was our our target audience for this. So what we did is we had a 5-year grant here. We first wanted to see what were the most common risk factors. So we decided to do a risk factor survey for year 1 to determine what the most common risk factors were out there that we were observing, and then see where we can target our intervention to have the most impact for industry. And then year 2, we started developing an AMC toolbox and then training staff on the AMC. This was a very important step because historically, inspectors are very used to telling operators what they need to do, but maybe not so versed on helping operators develop plans to prevent things that work in to prevent reoccurring violations in the future. So, and that was something we spent a few hours training each of our staff doing. And then year 3, we did some outreach. We have some videos that are linked to inspection reports. So basically, whenever a violation that's a priority violation that is included underneath this AMC toolbox, there's a link on our inspection report. So if they have a violation for cold holding, there'll be a link to the page where they can actually go and develop some plans based on that. And then finally, year 4, we did some revisions and updates, continuing with the videos and the linkage. And then finally, year 5, we did a risk factor survey, which was just completed last year, again, to see if the results of our active managerial control toolbox and see how it's worked for industry. Next slide. This is just a screenshot of one of the pages that we have for our AMC toolbox. And if you guys want, you can contact me. I'll give you the links to that. As you can see here, we have the 10 risk factors that are most common. So everything from temperatures to hand hygiene, cleaning and food contact surfaces, approved source, employee health, and cross-contamination. So each of these radio buttons will bring you to this next page here. We also have them available in Spanish and Chinese, which are the predominant languages other than English that are spoken here within the Maricopa County. And there's like a getting started video that kind of gives you a little brief. All these videos are about 3 to 5 minutes long. And there's policy, training, and verification, again, working with the visual oral type culture. And then we also have some links to some templates and some posters that are on this page as well. Next slide. So really the most important thing whenever you're dealing with active managerial control is to answer these questions. Who is responsible? What are we trying to look at? When should it be evaluated or monitored? Where is a concern? How are we going to do it? And what is a correction that's going to be made? Okay, and that's really all the questions that are on this template. This on the right-hand side of your page here, you can see these are, this is something that we will give to an operator. Say, for instance, we're scheduling a long-term intervention visit, we'll give this information, a link to this page, and then also give them, making sure that they understand that they should try to work through some of these questions before we visit with them. This will make the interaction a lot more productive, and then also making sure that we're developing a plan that will work for the operator. Next slide. This is just some looking at our risk factor survey. I could spend a whole presentation talking about the results of our risk factor survey. You can see here, year 1, that was conducted back in 2015. And then year 5, the number of risk control violations that were out. Cold holding is still a major concern. I know FDA has also seen cold holding as probably one of the #1 concerns out there. But we do have some improvement with knowledge for the person in charge of allergens. Hand washing did show an improvement as well. And then there's some other areas that we're still working on looking at improving. So, I mean, and really, if you can look at this, hopefully within the next survey that we do within the next 5 years, we'll probably see some even greater improvements here. So, but you can see here that there is some areas that we still need to work on and talking to operators out and probably getting some more information about our policies and procedures. Next. As I talked about earlier, we have an active managerial control class. This is required for any operator that has the same priority risk factor on 3 consecutive inspections. And if they have the same priority risk factor, they can attend this course in lieu of potential revocation or loss of permit, so their permit to operate, so legal action. It's a 2-hour course. Right now, we of course have it virtually. Historically, we've had it in person, where we have operators, and really the benefit of this is introducing them to active managerial control. It allows operators to interact with each other too. So that way they can kind of see, you know, have a mutual understanding of some of the challenges that they may be having in their facilities and implementing these, and see how we can overcome those challenges. So hopefully by the end of this, they'll be able to at least start developing an active managerial control plan. Next slide. So we have actually been doing this AMC course since 2002. So we've had it for quite a few years now. Again, it promotes the active participation of management in the daily operations of their business with a focus of policy, training, and verification, very important components. Course attendees have seen a 53% reduction in the occurrence of risk factor violations. So really the people that have attended this course, we see very few repeats of them coming back. And we actually have seen some operators and some of our most challenged facilities become some of our best performing operators out there just by implementing these policies and procedures. Next slide. And that's all I have to say. This is our contact information, and our website is there at the bottom, and there's some links to our active managerial control toolbox on that page, as well as our class. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, so next we have Clark Snyder from Environmental Health Services at Riverstone Health in Billings, Montana. Clark is a program manager with 15 years of experience working as a registered sanitarian for Riverstone Health. So Clark, you're up.
Thanks, Katherine. So yeah, again, my name is Clark Snyder. I work for Riverstone Health in Billings, Montana. You can go to the next slide. So this is Billings. Come and visit us. Probably not right now, but put it on your future plans. I'm sure you'll have a good time. Next slide. So this graphic here kind of illustrates our journey through the standards, and I'll be pretty quick here with it. But as you can see, we started in 2003. We enrolled, and in 2012, that's really when we got engaged with the standards. So as you can see on the swoosh there, those dots, you can see 2013, we did get a FDA grant for 5 years. And then after that grant, we got another grant for 3 years. So we are really fortunate with funding. And that allowed us, as of right now, we meet standards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 9. And then on the end of the swoosh there, you can see we are right now creating a strategic plan for the next funding period. So you can go to the next slide. So here are some general strategies on how we approach standard 3 and basically all of our standards. Standards require a lot of time and effort. So we dedicate about half of a FTE with the funding that we are awarded to work on the program standards. Also something to note, if you get awarded funding to work on the standards, you'll probably have to create a plan and have a plan in place for progressing through the standards. That's a good thing, right? It's also, if you're awarded money, you'll be held accountable for making progress. So those are both two good things for the standards if you want to progress with them. Secondly, you need to leverage resources. We do that a lot. We don't reinvent the wheel. We use food chilled. We use, Google searches on other health departments on what they've created. So we take other resources and just modify them to fit our program. Also, use your retail food specialist. Brad Tufto is ours, and he's been great. I can't say enough about Brad. He helps us a lot with the standards. So the third thing is we integrate the program standards into our performance management metrics, and we do a lot of quality improvement that involves the standards. Basically, the standards are quality improvement, right? And then fourth, get buy-in from your leadership in your organization. We've done a lot of presentations for our leadership, just giving them information on the standards and what they are. That helps a lot, and our leadership supports our enrollment in the standards. And lastly, get your staff involved. The more time or effort you make to engage your staff, the better you'll be off. You get more help with standards, and you can go to the next slide. Here's a work plan that we developed for Standard 3 for our grant in 2017. I just show this because having a work plan will create a roadmap for you and keep you on task. So those are always two good things to have when you're working on the standards. You can go to the next slide. So by meeting Standard 3, we've greatly improved our processes here at Riverstone Health, specifically with our on-site corrective action policy, our variance request policy, and just our HACCP reviews in general. Go to the next slide. Our corrective action policy is a great tool for our staff to use in the field. Basically, it provides suggestions for on-site corrections with out-of-compliance violations. It's almost like a decision guide our inspectors can use out there in the field. For example, if we see someone, we take a temperature of a cooking temperature, and it's not quite up to the temp we need it, then the inspector knows, hey, you got to put that back on the cook line and achieve that required temperature that's in the food code. Other examples would be if something's out of temperature, the inspector knows that that food operator needs to discard that food if it's been out of temperature for over 4 hours. So those are some of the examples of how that works. Also, our inspectors must obtain corrective action before completing a inspection. If they don't, that just basically implies that that violation isn't important or it's not a priority for the food establishment. And also, our inspections get posted, so if the public sees that risk factor violations aren't getting corrected, that would imply that we aren't following through on getting those corrective actions. So along with our corrective action policy, we have other supporting documents that kind of coexist. We have other documents such as assessing holding temperatures and how to achieve correction on site with those. Also, we have guidelines for best practices on how to document corrective action on reports. That's really important to us. Next slide. So variance request and HACCP review, we've come a long way in this department, although it can still be a challenge. We do have a step-by-step process now in place for when we get a variance request, and if there is a HACCP with that variance request. Before we had this policy, it was kind of deer in the headlights. We didn't know what to do basically. But after this policy was created, we got a little bit more comfortable, and we did start seeing more variances and HACCPs come through our department. So with that, I think we really have increased our confidence in reviewing variances with HACCPs. So we do them quite regularly now. So some different things that we have in our policy that might be different from other jurisdictions are each of our staff, we all review variances and HACCPs that come in. But we don't like to leave one person on an island to review those HACCPs. So we form a committee of 3 people, and I'm always involved in that committee, and it will be 2 inspectors. So it really, it's almost a group review. We'll have meetings, and it's just, you're not leaving someone on the island that's not really maybe comfortable doing this. So we really like that process. Another thing that might be different is when we get variance requests, we as environmental health will make a recommendation to our board after we review that or request. So all the variances have to, in the final stages, get approved by our Board of Health. So that might be different from a lot of jurisdictions. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about sustaining conformance with Standard 3. We review our Standard 3 policies every year. We have a calendar, and we have a Monday morning meeting every week, and we go through those policies at least once a year. So staff will remember those policies and hopefully won't forget them. Also, we audit completeness of inspection reports. One of the criteria is correction on site. To the right there on the slide, you can see a logic model. So we're wanting staff to basically reach over 80% completeness with criteria that we've chosen on inspection reports, which include the correction on site. As of right now, we are achieving over 80%, but that's another thing we do to kind of sustain correction on site. Also, if we dip below that 80%, we'll implement quality improvement projects. Riverstone Health loves quality improvement projects. We do a lot of them. They are good. Examples are, trainings at staff meetings, maybe developing tools that can assist staff in the field. So those are some of the examples of our quality improvement projects. And lastly, but not least, you got to get your staff involved if you want to sustain conformance with these standards. Have them involved, get their participation, and you'll be greatly rewarded. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Clark.
Yep.
So our final panelist for today is Bridget Bushoff from Clark County Public Health in Washington State. Bridget is the Food Safety Program Manager for the county since 2018, where she has been serving for the past 14 years. So now, while Tim and Clark provided their experience as seasoned jurisdictions meeting Standard 3, Bridget will be providing insights as someone who has recently met this standard. So handing it over to you now, Bridget.
Hi, thank you, Katherine. I'm happy to be here today to share some of our Standard 3 experiences with everybody. I'm going to see, I can control this, okay. With my time, I plan to review Clark County's approach to permit categories and assigned inspection frequencies. I will show examples of inspection forms used by staff for routine and HACCP inspections and talk about the policies we have in place, all of which helped us obtain Standard 3 verification last year. Our 2016 self-assessment found that we were already meeting the requirements for components 1, 2, and 3 of standard 3. These components are around inspection form design, risk assessment categories, and inspection frequencies based upon risk assignment. But we needed improvements in the components focusing on corrective action policies, variance requests, and HACCP plans. I'm bouncing between screens and I'm so sorry. I will get the hang of this in just a second. This document is a descriptive version of the program's fee schedule. We update this each year and make it available to the public and our staff. It contains a brief description of each plan review and permit type, and it identifies the annual inspection frequency for different food establishment complexities or risk levels. The HACCP plan review is featured on the bottom left because through our work with standard 3, it was a new addition to our fee schedule in 2021. Above that, you can see that we already had a fee in place for variance reviews. We were already completing variance reviews as part of our standard work. The area featured on the back side here highlights the annual HACCP permit fee. This fee is in addition to the annual retail food operating permit. Our food safety program is 100% fee supported, so each fee amount is set to cover all of the expenses associated with the service. Currently, I have estimated that a HACCP plan review is going to consume about 9 hours of staff time, and a HACCP inspection will take about 6 hours of staff time. We are working to provide guidance materials online in hopes of receiving higher quality HACCP plan submittals that maybe down the road would result in a lower fee. I thought I would share a little bit about some of the inspection types we perform. I assume pre-opening inspections, routine inspections, that those are standard across all food safety programs, and that follow-up inspections likely are as well. We also perform an educational inspection, and I don't know how widely utilized something like that is. An educational inspection, an educational inspection is what we call the first routine inspection. And we aim to complete this within 30 days of a change of ownership or a food business first operating. The educational inspections are offered as a teaching tool. And they do cover everything that a routine inspection does. The inspection can be scheduled or unscheduled, and the score is not publicized. Those are some of the big differences. We recognize that a poor inspection score right after opening could really hamper business success. And we want businesses to, of course, serve safe food, but we also want them to be successful. Immediate corrections and long-term corrective actions are required when violations are observed. And a need for a repeat inspection based off of a poor score during the educational inspection does not result in a follow-up fee. Usually we would have a follow-up inspection fee. This is a sample of our inspection form. This form was provided to us by the Washington State Department of Health, and it is used widely throughout Washington State. The form uses in, out, not applicable, and not observed to document observations made during inspections. The form is divided between high and low risk factors, red for high, blue for low. This is the second page of the inspection form. When a violation is observed, the inspector documents compliance and enforcement actions by writing the observation made, the code requirement, and any short or long-term corrective action that applies. And similar to what Clark was describing in Billings, high-risk violations require immediate corrective action. In developing the HACCP review and inspection components of Standard 3, we needed to develop an inspection report form. We used the FDA inspection checklist as a template, adding our agency information to the header section and reorganizing the information, reorganizing the order of the information just a little bit. There is a separate HACCP inspection form for each special process. This one on the screen is for components or food additives. So we have a separate form for each process. Individual items on this inspection form are marked yes, no, or not applicable. And please don't pay any attention to which items on this form are marked in, out, or not applicable, because this was just a test inspection we were using to make sure that the report was actually functional. We did have an existing version of an inspection and enforcement policy, but it needed to be updated to incorporate all of the components found in Standard 3. We also developed a separate policy addressing variances and HACCPs. Between the two policies, we now have a pretty comprehensive summary of the inspection frequencies for various permit types, standard enforcement actions that of course include immediate corrective actions and development of long-term control plans, how to address repeat violations or closures due to violation points incurred during an inspection, and guidance for verifying and validating requests for variances and HACCP applications for special processes. So what were some of our challenges and considerations with Standard 3 as we went through the process of becoming verified? Resources and funding needed considered, as I believe that is almost always the case with all the work that we do. Our existing documents, procedures, and processes did set us up really well for meeting the Standard 3 requirements. Staff time dedicated to the development of the missing components is what we really needed to pull it all together. So we received a small AFDO verification grant, and that covered a few hours of staff time each week to work on formally incorporating the missing components into our program. And then the grant deliverable of achieving verification also helped provide some motivation to keep us progressing forward. I have come to recognize that maintaining compliance with each of the verified standards requires some oversight, and therefore funding for the staff that are completing the oversight. Incorporating various components of the standards, whether you are verified in that standard or not, it does result in additional work regardless of the program size. For example, policies, once they are written, need periodic review and updating. Other standards involve routine quality control or quality analysis steps. The training components of standards at a minimum results in the need for document organization and time frames for person conducting inspections. So I really feel that additional staff resources is a must to maintain compliance with verified standards. Because many of the standards do provide such a good framework for the operation of a reputable food safety program, we want to continue becoming more compliant with the standards. So we have added a 0.5 FTE position who will be tasked with monitoring our ongoing compliance and facilitating verification of more standards. Hopefully over time, that 0.5 FTE can grow to be a 1.0 FTE or higher, but right now we at least have a little bit of dedicated resource. And also sticking with funding for just another moment, I mentioned earlier that we needed to add categories to our fee schedule because there were components of Standard 3 that resulted in a different type of plan review or inspections that we weren't already doing. And so if something like that is similarly true for your program, then you'll want to be sure to consider how you're going to fund that additional work. A separate challenge that I have not yet addressed, but I'm working on it, is how to incorporate food establishments that were utilizing special processes prior to us establishing a plan review and an annual HACCP permit system. A likely possibility is that we'll use a phased approach and possibly even a free plan review period for those establishments that are pre-existing in special processes. I'm anticipating some pushback from business owners as the new additional annual HACCP fee is around $700. Our department leadership and our county council who approve our fee schedule every year are already aware of the associated costs. But because we haven't incorporated those existing food establishments, there hasn't been a lot of pushback or attention brought to the fee schedule or that fee on the schedule. And a final consideration, last but not least, also something that Clark mentioned, remember to reserve time to train your team and regularly visit the newly developed policies and procedures. I think that compliance with standard 3 is really helpful in creating consistency amongst staff, but it's only valuable if everybody knows that the policy exists, know what topics are in that policy, and know how to access the document as a reference when it's needed. So that is my quick summary of standard 3 in Clark County, Washington. Thank you for listening, and hopefully we do still have some time for a discussion.
Thank you, Bridget. So Tim and Clark, if you can join us to answer a few questions that have come in. Okay, so we have a question that came in, and this is for all the panelists. For places that have approved HACCP plans, how do you keep track of all of it? And if you can answer in the order you presented.
This is Tim with Maricopa County. What we actually do is we have an electronic inspection system, and we have a condition for each establishment that has an approved HACCP plan or variance, and then we can add all the information as like a Word document attached to the permit, so that way when the inspector's in the field, they can look at that and hopefully be able to assess it, knowing that that's there. So that's how we monitor it.
Yeah, we're not as far as Maricopa County here at Riverstone. Just a basic Excel spreadsheet. We always want our staff to do a file review before their inspection. So if it is a new inspector, they'll know that that place has a HACCP. Looking forward, maybe putting something in our electronic database that would maybe signal on, you know, the establishment's page that they do have a HACCP might be an idea, but it's pretty basic right now for us.
And then in Clark County, we built into our database. It's basically a permit. We're issuing a permit for a HACCP process, a special process. And so they're getting their own permit annually. And so these are populating our work list as would any other food establishment that has a permit with us.
Okay, next question is for Bridget. Was standard 3 one of the early, middle, or later standards your program targeted? And did you find it foundational for tackling other standards?
We are pretty early on. We have been verified in standard 3 and standard 7, so early. And I think that it's what it helped us do is kind of solidify what our team was already doing. So a lot of a lot of what is part of standard 3 are things that we were already doing. Variances, for example, we weren't doing HACCPs yet, but everything else we were already doing, and much of the processes just weren't recorded on paper. So it brought more consistency to our team and better reference documents, and lessened the amount of discussion that was necessary, kind of recurring discussion on how to go about re-inspections or what we do during an educational inspection if a repeat inspection was necessary, a follow-up inspection was necessary. We now have all of that formalized.
All right, I think that's all the time we had. Katie, do you see any other questions that I may have missed?
I do not.
Okay, so with that said, I'd like to thank all the speakers in this panel. I think there was a lot of great information presented by them that can hopefully help others in attendance with meeting standard 3. So thank you again, and back to you, Katie.